Do aliens exist and are they among us? Are weird creatures lurking in the darkness? Do evil entities hide in the shadows of your bedroom while you sleep? Join us as we explore all this and more on the Warped Reality Podcast.
What's going on, Ghost fam? Ghost Joe here with our first bonus episode of the season. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode about the exorcism of Roland Doe. And if you haven't checked that out, definitely go back and do that. And it was our introduction to our new co-host and Warped team member, Creepy Ken. By the way, it's sticking, sir. It's sticking. It's already done. It's stuck. Sorry, dude. I think he's a great addition to the Warp team, and we have a lot planned for you guys in the near future, so definitely stay tuned for that. Also, we have some awesome new shirts coming out soon, where all of the proceeds will be going to various charities, so definitely stay tuned for that, and I hope you buy some stuff. So before we get into the right headspace, I'm going to do a quick countdown of my top 5 creepiest cartoons that are not your cutesy Saturday morning viewing. Well, all right, maybe this one might be. So number 5 is The Real Ghostbusters, and it was from 1986 to 1991. You know, yeah, it was based on comedy and stuff, but certain episodes, especially The Boogeyman Cometh, went dark fast, man. Twisted dimensions, ancient evils, and existential hauntings made this Saturday morning show a paranormal punch you did not see coming. Number 4, we have The Secret of Nim, 1982. On its surface, a dark fantasy about sentient rats, but the supernatural overtones run deep. Visions, psychic abilities, and an eerie sense of fate and ritual that blurs science with mysticism. That glowing amulet, it's more than just a plot device, you know? It knows, right? So then number 3, we have Monster, and that came out in 2004. So this, not paranormal in the ghost sense, but this psychological thriller blurs reality, identity, and malevolence in ways that feel possessed, you know? The villain, Johann, has almost a supernatural presence, a force of doom that haunts every frame. Then we have number 2 is Gravity Falls, and that was from 2012 to 2016. It's quirky, yes, but it's layered with dimensional rifts, haunted archives, cursed symbols, and a book that writes back, Northwest Mansion Mystery, and Weirdmageddon, episodes ramp up the paranormal to Lovecraftian levels, you know? Bill Cipher wasn't just chaos, he was invocation. And then number 1 of the top 5, creepiest cartoons. Number 1, Dead Space, Downfall, and it came out in 2008. This animated gore meets spiritual corruption in deep space. The marker isn't just alien tech, it's a relic of another realm, warping minds, warped, okay? Speaking in whispers and reviving the dead, claustrophobic, relentless, and unholy. So now let's take a step back, take a breath, and after all that, let's woosah ourselves into the right headspace. Take it away, Johnny.
Good evening. You are entering a dimension where up is down, good is evil, and day is night. You've just made a wrong turn into the right headspace.
Thanks, Joe. Hey, everybody, I'm back. If you are a regular listener to the show, then you are aware that the Pine Bush UFO Festival took place Saturday, June 7th. And you're also aware that I was a presenter at the speaker's tent in Crawford Square. It was a pretty miserable day to have a festival. It began with me having to pass a 4mm by 2mm kidney stone. Never, ever a good thing. And at first I was worried that the pain and things like that were going to delay me or even possibly stop me from going to the talk, but I was going to brave it out either way. I had made a promise that I would do my talk, and either way, I was sticking to it. Luckily, about 30 minutes prior to the presentation, I finally passed the stone. The rain started roughly about an hour before the festival, and it just continued on until about 5 p.m. And then at 5 p.m., the clouds cleared, and lo and behold, the sun comes out. kind of I'm going to call it kind of like a dick move by Mother Nature. Definitely, the weather definitely had a big impact on attendance this year. In the past, we've had between 4,000 and 5,000 people. We kind of averaged that. Even during COVID, we had, I think it was over 4,000 people here. I think this year we had maybe about a third of that. So somewhere around maybe like between 13, maybe 14, 1,500 people in total. To be honest, I was pleasantly surprised by the turnout. I didn't think we were going to have that many people brave the weather. So if you are one of those people who was a diehard and you came out and you took part in the day, thank you very much for doing so. Let's see, presentation. I started my presentation a little afternoon. There's a group that was on before me that was doing music and some weird noises, kind of like a Star Trek kind of sound to it, that sort of hippie-ish kind of vibe. I got to tell you, I was nervous, not because of the kidney stone, not because I had to speak in front of a crowd. The big thing I was concerned about was the topic and how well my topic was going to be received. I joked with my wife prior to going out and doing the presentation. I said, hey, make sure you park the car really close just in case I need to make a quick getaway. Why? I had these images of, if you've ever seen the movie Young Frankenstein, there's the one scene where the villagers are armed with pitchforks and torches and they go looking for the monster. Except in my scenario, it was me being chased, not the monster. Luckily, I didn't have to make a mad dash for the car. So presentation-wise, if you were there, you heard me. The presentation was titled, Are UFOs and Aliens Real? Empirical and Anecdotal Evidence Supporting Their Existence. In spite of the downpour, there were actually about 80 people that were kind of snuggled and huddled under the tent in the nearby pavilion. The first few minutes were kind of tense. Why? I'm always honest and upfront about my views, and I told the crowd that, hey, I'm a skeptic. Based on their expressions, it was I'm going to say pretty apparent they were not necessarily the skeptical type. So at that point, I said, you know what? Let me do a quick little side note here. And I spent about 2-3 minutes explaining what a skeptic is, the origin of the term, and how skeptics are different than cynics, and that sort of thing. And that kind of made their attitudes or their expressions soften a little bit. Now, as far as the presentation is concerned, I considered all different types of cases. The ones that I wound up settling on were Roswell, the 2004 Tic Tac incident, radar hits from 2014-15, David Grush, and then I also included some UFO surveys from 2012, 2019, 2021. Now, as far as Roswell, what I did was talk about some of like the main witnesses for each one of these cases. So for Roswell, you're talking about Jesse Marcel. If you're talking about the Tic Tac, well, then you got to talk about David Fravor. If you're talking about radar hits from 2014, 2015, well, then you're talking about Ryan Graves. So what I did was, rather than attack the people, and maybe attack is the wrong word here, maybe it's a little strong, I went after the testimonies. And then I talked about why those testimonies weren't necessarily very strong. So I spent about an hour showing the audience the anecdotal evidence, the claims that were made, and then explaining the major issues that I had with those witness claims. This was followed by a Q&A session, which lasted for about between 20 to 30 minutes, which I was kind of surprised by. I kind of expected most people, once I got done talking, would be like, okay, yeah, very nice, and they'd kind of get up and walk away. I was very, very shocked that I actually had the largest audience. In the end, I actually had what I thought was the most participation as far as audience asking questions. And what's really funny was there were people that were teenage kids. Like I have one girl, she was probably somewhere around maybe 14, 15. She looked like my freshman, running the same age group as the freshman that I teach. I had another woman There was a few older people in the crowd. One woman, she has to be close to my mom's age, so she's got to be in her late 70s and her early 80s. And she actually asked some really good questions. One of them was about how was the universe formed, which I was like, damn, you're going to throw that at me? I was like, how much time do you have where I can sit here and kind of go into explanations? Another question that I was asked was, why did I become an investigator? Why am I doing talks, that sort of thing? What was the most interesting case that I've investigated? And who are the people in the UFO world that you look up to? So I did speak about that. I did mention those things, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. If you're a listener, guys that I look up to, I do like Micah Hanks. He does his homework. John Greenwald Jr. from the Black Vault, dude does his homework, his due diligence. There are other people that I throw out there. Unfortunately, some of them have passed. You got Philip Klass, and I know people get down on that dude, but his stuff is still really good. Yeah, maybe sometimes he kind of goes a little bit over the top, but for the most part, his stuff is really good. Joe Nichols would be another guy. He recently just passed away. Another guy we'll look at is Curtis Peoples, Jack Brewer, who wrote Wayward Sons and also wrote the book The Graves Were Framed. Another one that I really always go back to and quote is Adam Wright's Saucer, Spooks, and Kooks. So if you want to know the people that I reach out to or the people that I'm going to listen or look at or read their stuff, those are the guys that I'm going to look at or listen to first. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to check what they have as far as the things that they include in their show notes, that sort of stuff. And then I'm going to backtrack that stuff. And then I'm going to do my own checking on top of that. So after everything was done, I'm disconnecting my computer. I'm packing up my gear. There were about 4 or 5 people that had approached me with additional questions. The one gentleman shook my hand and thanked me for the presentation and said, another gentleman came up to me and he said, hey, you know what? We need more skeptics like you, which really impressed me. I did not think I would have anybody come up to me and say anything even close to that. One of the funniest moments, I I thought this was absolutely hilarious. A woman actually asked me if I would pose to take a picture with her. It was her birthday. She had come up from Maryland, not necessarily to hear me speak, but to come up for the UFO festival. Her sister lives in town. My wife is actually friends with her sister. They go for walks and that sort of stuff. She pulls me to the side. She's like, hey, can I get my picture taken with you? And I just started laughing. And I'm like, I look at her, I go, seriously? Why do you want to take a picture with me? And her response was, so I can tell people that when you get big, hey, I met him a long time ago when he did one of his first public speeches. As my wife and I were walking around, we were looking, because at this point it was well past, it was like around 1:30 or so. We were both really hungry. I hadn't eaten anything. She hadn't eaten anything. And when she doesn't eat, she gets really hangry. So we're walking around looking for food vendors. As we are, she told me that prior to the presentation, there was a young man that had approached her while she was seated there. And he asked, is this the presentation that's being given by John Wright? To which she's responded, yes. The guy asked, is the seat next to you taken? And my wife said, no, it's open. And she just kind of chuckled at it. And the guy sat down next to her. As far as the food is concerned, what did we settle on? We actually settled on street tacos. The tacos were kind of so-so, I'll call them. But we did have elote, which is street corn. Oh, my God. The street corn stole the show. I wish I could remember the food truck and its name so I could kind of give them a shout out here. But wow, that elote, first time I've ever had it. Everybody else, if I ever have elote again, it's going to have a real hard time living up to that. Anyway, that was all followed by a funnel cake. Every single year at the festival, I will get a funnel cake. The local Boy Scout chapter makes it. And yes, I did eat I'm going to say the majority. I'm going to say 85% of the funnel cake was shoveled into my mouth. And yeah, I don't usually like sharing food, but my wife paid for the funnel cake, so I kind of felt obligated to give her a little bit of it. Later that night, we did have our speakers conference was referred to as the speakers conference. There's one couple, I'll be honest, I wasn't there for that. I wanted to see the guys that were coming after that. They were from Arizona, and they talked about being former policemen. And I caught like the question and answer session of their talk. The ones I was really interested in were Mark D'Antonio and then also Nick Pope. I met Mark almost about 4 years ago, I think it was. And it was at the festival. I was doing tours at the museum. And what was really cool is he, along with other MUFON people, and it was really funny because they were dressed up as the men in black. They're all wearing black suits, ties, all that stuff, sunglasses. It was really funny. Him along with, I think it was the head of Connecticut's MUFON chapter and a few other people. In any case, they're walking through, we do the tour, and as they leave my section, Mark peeks back at me and gives me a thumbs up and mouths, "Awesome job," and goes on to the next section. So anyway, he spoke about his fifth dimension. Now, his name should sound familiar to you guys. The reason why is one of the more recent episodes Joe did was with Mark, and he did talk about the fifth dimension and how aliens could potentially be traveling. The final speaker of the night was Nick Pope. I'll be honest, I was really looking forward to this presentation. All right, I'm going to try and be nice about it. Unfortunately, it fell short for me for a number of reasons, and I'm going to keep it real brief here because I could probably go on and on and on about this. First, he spent about 5 minutes talking about the Ancient Aliens live travel show. He talked about their schedule, where they were going to be, all this other stuff. And, you got to come out, and you got to see us. And we got a couple of faces that have changed and blah, blah, blah. This was followed by a 5-minute story about Nick and Giorgio Tsoukalos at a bar. Some other plugs for other events that he was doing and that sort of thing. As my friend Curtis would say to me later on, damn, all this dude is about is money. I don't think Curtis was wrong. Secondly, Nick repeated and reinforced the same old, tired, ancient alien bullshit that has been spattered for the last 10 seasons. And he's talking about, we got this new season coming up and blah, blah, blah. And, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And, disclosure. I'm telling you right now, folks, disclosure ain't coming. So don't hold your breath on that one because you're going to wind up passing out or dying. The thing that really struck me the most was the glaring mistakes that he made when he was trying to reinforce what he was talking about. He talked about the 2017 New York Times article. He mentioned that ATIP was a program that was funded by the government, $22 million, and it was a sanctioned program. Go back, listen to the Lou Elizondo segment that I did. We know for a fact it was not funded by the U.S. government. It was an informal program that was conducted by Lou Elizondo, Jay Stratton, whoever the frig else they could drag out of the woodwork to be a part of that program. OSAP is the program that received the money. OSAP was part of BASS, and that was to look at UAP. That had nothing to do with ATIP. So, suffice to say, I did not stay for the remainder of the talk. When I was walking out, Lance, who is the museum director, he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, dude, are you leaving?" And I responded, "Yeah, dude, I made a promise to you that I would never cause a scene or intentionally ruin one of these events." The reason why is because at that point, I wanted to raise my hand and I wanted to start debating this dude right then and there and start throwing out, here's why you're wrong, and hitting but anyway, I'd made a promise to Lance that even if I didn't like the people or what they were saying, you know what, dude, this is your event. I'm not going to shit on your event and ruin it, because if I do that, then any other people that maybe these guys might be connected with might not want to do it in the future. So I'm like, you know what, Lance, I'm keeping my promise. I'm not going to cause a problem. And you know what? I'm just going to leave. So suffice to say, I had some, I'm going to call them funny yet serious points about the presenter and his topics. And I think the word, it was either asshat or clown or both came out during the conversation. Anyway, moving on. On the short drive home, my son and I talked about Mark's fifth dimension presentation, and we just kind of spitballing ideas about modes of transportation. And we also made comparisons if you've ever seen the movie Guardians of the Galaxy or you've ever seen Avengers Endgame, where they do like the jump scenes from one place to another place and so on. So we were kind of talking about that. You know what it sounds like? Yeah, you get like the hexagon thing around you and you got that bubble and you can pick a spot and you hit that spot and it brings you out, blah, blah, blah. So it was really cool that it kind of sparked that conversation between us. In the end, I walked away from the day with some insight into what it must be like for some of these speakers who have become celebrities and their possible motivations for doing the speaking circuit. I got to say that being acknowledged and recognized are a huge ego boost. I had a chance to interact with people that I usually don't have a chance to interact with. It sparked a great conversation between my son and I. Overall, even though it was shitty weather, even though I passed a kidney stone, and I'm going to say a shady speaker, it turned out to be a really good day. It's one of those things with some of the experiences, the moments that I share with my son at the conference, and then my wife being in the crowd and meeting the people, those types of things. Those are things that I'm going to carry with me. Now, keep an ear out for the next segment in my series on whistleblowers. This one is going to focus on Jacob Barber and again, I'm going to try and be nice here. I'll just call it what it is, man. The insane claims that this man makes. Until next time, hopefully this leaves you in the right headspace.
Thank you so much for that awesome segment, John. Listen, I did want to say something a little bit about this segment, though. See, there's something called radio etiquette. I don't know if that even applies to podcasts, but let's try not to talk about your issues downstairs. That's a little too much information, even for me. But I love you, man, and I really wish I could have been there. I really planned to, and then I had to work, and I was so mad because me and my daughter went last year, and we had such a blast. It was a really, really fun time, and I would have loved to seen you speak. And you sounded like you were a rock star, man. It sounded like people were asking for your autograph and taking pictures with you. That's great, bro. That's great. And it couldn't happen to a better person and a more well-informed person. And another thing too is the reason why I love you so much on this show is because you're a skeptic about things. You need some of that skepticism. You don't have to be a skeptic where, if you see a ghost floating in front of your face and you're like, oh, that's not, but you have to have some kind of realism, some kind of realistic skepticism towards things. And that's why I love having you on the show, man. So keep doing what you're doing. I love your segments. Make them as long as you want, buddy, because we'll just keep doing these bonus episodes with you and Edgegrave, and I'm all good with that. So before we get into Edgegrave, though, I'm going to go over a little bit of something else, right? So every generation has them. Those childhood films that disturbed us more than they delighted. Maybe it was a twisted villain. Maybe it was a dream logic that felt just a little too real. But when we look back, we're left asking, was that movie even really meant for kids? So let's go over some of these movies that, might have been a little bit darker than we might have remembered. So number one is Pinocchio, right? That's from 1940. And, forget the songs, man. What about the boys turning into donkeys? The howls, the transformation. Pleasure Island is less a cautionary tale and more a straight plunge into body horror. That was just insane. And then you have Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, 1971. And let's, 2 words, right? The tunnel. Flashing lights, worms on faces, and Gene Wilder's awesome performance of him singing, "There's no earthly way of knowing which direction we are going." Come on, man. That was the spookiest thing, right? And it suddenly felt like it was a threat, not really a rhyme, but it was almost like going through a tunnel of madness, So number 3, we got The Brave Little Toaster in 1987. I don't remember ever seeing this one, but from what they said, you thought you were ready for a cute talking appliance, right? And you weren't ready for a tortured air conditioner's mental breakdown or the junkyard scene where a car sings its own eulogy before being crushed to death. Existential dread, and it was animated, man. I mean, that's just dark as hell, bro. The Brave Little Toaster, dark, bro. So there's a reason Return to Oz and these films leave scars. They don't pander. The surreal visuals, adult-level stakes, and uncaring worlds weren't afraid to whisper, the world isn't always safe. For a child, that realization is the real horror. So with that being said, without further ado, let's get into Edgegrave Dave's review of Return to Oz. Let's get it, Dave.
Horrible reviews with Edgegrave Dave.
A desert that can disintegrate your bones into sand. An evil witch princess who has a glass case of 31 screaming heads. An abandoned post-apocalyptic city where decapitated bodies have been mummified into stone. And not to mention electroshock therapy to ride the lightning all the way straight into your own harrowing hell. Edgegrave Dave here, guys. And speaking of Ride the Lightning, when I recently got together with Ghost Joe at a Metallica concert, I was telling him about the very first terrifying, harrowing, and scary experience I ever had watching a movie. And as much as a little boy as I would have loved to go back to an enchanted place filled with innocent childhood memories, what I got was 1985's Return to Oz. And believe me, this place was definitely not somewhere over the rainbow. Happy 40th anniversary! So guys, it's time to click our heels together 3 times. Here it is. Here's an Edge. Grave warning. Spoiler alert. Guys, it's just incredible to imagine that 86 years ago, there was a beloved classic movie that had beautiful, bright colors, that had songs that children of all ages, including the young and old, would know the lyrics to, and a story about a little girl that leaves a Kansas farm and goes to an enchanted land. And this movie, of course, is MGM's The Wizard of Oz, the movie that would play on the TV every holiday season, the movie that would give birth to so much merchandise, children using their imagination, and then all of a sudden, something happened in 1954. And what happened in 1954 was that the rights were given to the remaining Oz books to a certain company. This company was going to make a television series where they were going to use one of the stories. And then they were going to make a proposed live-action film, The Rainbow Road to Oz, which was never completed. All of a sudden, years had passed. From 1954 to 1980, this company said, hey, we better make a movie here, guys, or we're going to lose the rights. And the company that I am referring to spawned Return to Oz. And the company that made this movie is Walt Disney. And of course, little boy me first getting into The Wizard of Oz, I love that movie. And when I went into a store, my grandma and grandpa bought me a coloring book. And surely they thought, here's a Wizard of Oz coloring book. And I was so excited about it. I opened up one of the first pages to see a chicken. And I said, I don't seem to remember that from the movie. I did see the Scarecrow, though. He did look a little different. Tin Man and the Lion looked a little bit different, too. And then I saw it. There was an actual jack-o'-lantern-headed man that looks kind of like Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas when he's the Pumpkin King. Freaking Gumphead from the Evil Dead cabin. And another type of man, a gold bronze man that was a fat little machine. So, hey guys, streaming live on TikTok, his name was TikTok. This is definitely not what I was expecting. And what came next was renting Return to Oz when it came out on video. And that is where the harrowing experience manifested itself. This movie introduced a very young Fairuza Balk as Dorothy Gale, and she looked a lot younger. To be honest, every time that I look at her, I'm thinking of a Wendy's Frosty because she reminded me of the Wendy's logo. We had Stephen King's Carrie, Piper Laurie as Aunt Em, and Matt Clark, Uncle Henry, which was actually in one of the Candyman films. Already, this film had horror written all over it. And then we had Jim Henson's son. We had Brian Henson as Jack Pumpkinhead. He also did some of the operation work for the characters, and the movie was released June 21st, 1985. Now, I could certainly understand and appreciate what Disney was trying to do. They now had the rights to the early 20th century Oz novels, and this movie is actually a combination of two of them. We had The Marvelous Land of Oz from 1904 and Ozma of Oz, 1907. Yet, they still needed to make this a sequel to that classic MGM movie. What are we going to do? Have a nice hefty paycheck, of course, for those ruby slippers, where, believe it or not, they were silver in the novels. So the movie opens up about 6 months after the original tornado had struck. You can even see that their newly reconstructed house isn't completed yet. Poor Dorothy hasn't been sleeping well at all, and she's been going around trying to tell people that maybe it wasn't all a dream. And she does find a key in the chicken coop, which has the letters OZ. Now, it's after 1 a.m. She can't sleep. Aunt Em and Uncle Henry are really worried about her. So, you know what they do? Instead of a nice warm glass of milk, they take our little Wendy's logo to a sanitarium. And she has to meet electroshock therapy. This right here was the first indicator that maybe this isn't for kids when I was a kid. And my kids even watching this of certain scenes, I'll tell you what my little son said later. But when this doctor shows her the electroshock therapy machine, he says, look, it's got a face, it's got eyes, it's got a nose, it's got a mouth. This looks like the most horrifying hospital you could ever see. I thought maybe I was looking at Dracula's Castle or Dream Warriors or something like that. And the lights start to flicker. And before long, it's her time. Lightning strikes and the whole place loses power. And let's just say, with a little help, she makes her escape down the river. Somehow, going down the river in a chicken coop as opposed to somewhere over the rainbow, she ends up in Oz. And what she discovers is this barren wasteland full of sand, which turns out to be the deadly desert. And we find out what happens when you touch that sand later on in the movie. She carefully steps over the rocks to find a hazardous, abandoned, disgusting yellow brick road. Not to mention the original house that she had arrived in. She looks over, and that Emerald City looks to be a ghost town. She goes to investigate. When we investigate, we see a sign that says, beware the Wheelers. The Wheelers, guys, that is something that I will never forget. You have these guys that look like they should have joined the Tim Burton Joker's gang, and they have wheels for arms and legs, and they ride around. I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous. Maybe there's some Jim Carrey Riddler that I'm thinking of too, but they laugh like, hoo-hoo-hee-ha, the Wheelers! And nobody knows why they're there. They're wheeling around, headless, decapitated, mummified, stone-filled bodies. Dorothy tries to get away, and she opens up a door with that key. I know, guys, I've been giving a lot away right now, but I just got to tell you, this is where we meet TikTok, and this is where we find out that all the residents have been turned to stone by the Gnome King. The Gnome King, where the hell was he in the movies? One thing that I wish that they would have had was a little bit of a precursor, because nobody really knew, unless you were reading the novels, what was going on here. And I respect what they were trying to do with that, but such dark imagery, this is some of the darkest parts of these novels. This is the part of the movie where it seems that all hell breaks loose for childhood innocence. We meet a beautiful young princess named Princess Mombi, and she apparently knows what happened to the Scarecrow. And as she greets Dorothy and she walks down a hall, we discover that the walls are lined with glass cases filled with heads with eyes that can look. And she takes one off to change her mood and puts on an older head. And this head looks awfully a lot like the head nurse in the mental hospital where the electroshock therapy was. I can't even begin to imagine what they were thinking with this. We're going to get into the rating in just a little while. But man, looking at that, my son looked at me and I told him, don't worry, it's going to be okay, which I'm sure that many parents did back in 1985. Because in one of the glass cases is a powder of life. And all that I'm going to tell you is there's a whole screaming session where their heads are really angry and agitated and she has to get away. She builds this very strange part furniture, animal Gump, and she meets that Pumpkinhead, which is actually Jack Pumpkinhead. Eventually, we get all the way to the Gnome King, who looks a little bit like claymation and an animatronic with a really luxurious costume. I'm going to stop telling you what happens from there, but all that I will say is that everybody's worried about this chicken. This is a really horrifying, hellish place, too. The look of the movie, the feel of the movie, that dark, gritty, serious, and scary tone is just so shocking to me still that Disney would decide to make something like this where you really didn't have a lot of beats where you went to too much of a comedy part and too much of like a dark part. I mean, you did have the comedy and it was there and the story was definitely apparent, but you just can't get past some of the visuals that they decided to go with in this movie. And when she referred to the Tin Man as a Tin Woodsman, that's when I knew younger that something was a little bit different. When the line looked more like an animal when he was in stone and then turned back. I mean, everything does work out, but the Scarecrow had one of the most different changes of all. But the voice was kind of similar. Again, I did see what they were trying to do, but the fact that they made something like this, I just have to think, after so many years, and the Wizard of Oz was something that everybody knew, what in the hell were they thinking? I do give Fairuza Balk a lot of credit. This was the very first movie that she was ever in, and she did a great job. And Dorothy really did look much like the books. In the States, the movie made $11.1 million against a $28 million budget. Ooh. But outside of that, it did quite well outside of the U.S. Go figure. Since then, it's got quite the cult following. I mean, people that have seen the other Oz cartoons that have come out, there's especially Wicked, and it's become very popular once again. Due to the many questions that you'll have, a somewhat convoluted plot, having imagery that wasn't geared for the audience that it was going for, and especially sticking to source material, well, there were way too many questions to try to cash in on a loosely based sequel. I am going to have to go ahead and give this about a 2.5 to 3 graves out of 5. It's not a bad movie, but they really overshot who they were gearing this movie for. They really could have bridged more gaps and they could have spent a little bit more time on the characters. I mean, you don't really need musical numbers like in the original film and in Wicked, but they really should have done something to try to have the audience maybe grip onto it a little bit more easily. I would have to say, 2013's Oz the Great and Powerful was a little bit more of a step in the right direction of what the film could have been. But hey, this was the 80s, and 80s scary was the norm for a lot of PG movies. I mean, look at The Never-Ending Story, or even look at The Dark Crystal, which is one of my Jim Henson favorites. You know, it's definitely there. But given that the film and the material that everybody knew, I feel that they could have had a little bit more responsibility to the audience in that respect. But for our European listeners out there, and for those of you that want to make the trip, there is one of the last remnants of this movie as an attraction at Disney, as there used to be a parade with music back in 1985. If you do find yourself at Disneyland Paris, there is a storybook boat ride with a canal, and it does have a miniature model of Oz that's inspired by the film that does show Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodsman, and the Cowardly Lion in front of Emerald City, and music from that very Return to Oz parade float. So there you have it. This is one of Edgegrave Dave's earliest memories of horror being caught on film, and probably the first one. You can go ahead and grab that Frosty, throw on some Disney Plus, and that's where the film is streaming as of now, and I hope that it's there to stay so you can show your loved ones. This film after all, did give an illustrious career to Fairuza Balk that did go on to make The Craft, its sequel, and American History X, which is one of my favorite films with Ed Norton, and other horror films as well. American History X was not a horror film. Just enjoy the movie. And as promised, Ghost Joe, since I did not do this during the Teen Wolf review, here's a classic 1985 Blast You, He-Man! Skeletor impression. Back to you, Ghost Joe.
Yes, he did it, guys. He actually did it. That is awesome. That's why I love my guy, Dave. Listen, man, I have the best podcast team in the world, and you're going to know that from when you see Creepy Ken as well. And we have more surprises and more people that are going to be making guest appearances and more interviews and all that good stuff. And we have a lot of stuff coming up, I promise you. So definitely stick around. Check out all of our socials. You know, we have TikTok, we have Instagram, we have a YouTube. Please subscribe to that. Please subscribe to the YouTube. That'd be awesome. And check out everything, the Buzzsprout. Check out the Get Haunted Paranormal Network stuff all over Facebook. You'll always see all of their stuff in my show notes. They're always there. The Get Haunted USA Facebook page is where you'll find all the live shows that are happening, including the Warped Reality Paranormal podcast that is always Friday around 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you could check it out there as well. And guys, so that's going to do it for this first bonus episode of Season 5. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you to Edgegrave Dave. Thank you to John Wright. And we'll see you next week with some more spooky stuff. Later, guys. Thank you for listening to the Warped Reality Paranormal Podcast, and thank you to all of my guests and contributors that help make this show possible. If you have a paranormal experience you'd like to share, questions, comments, or you'd like to be a guest in the show, please leave me a voicemail at 845-600-0744, or you can email me at ghostjoeny@gmail.com. You can do so anonymously if you'd like. Also, please check out our show notes for all social media links of this show and some of our friends. The Warped Reality Paranormal Podcast, uncovering the unseen.